Good afternoon, everybody. Before we start, on behalf of my co-presenter, Mr. Hamad, I would like to thank Simon Poole, President of the Royal Astronomical Society of Canada, the Calgary Center, for his kind invitation to present this webinar in partnership with the Calgary Public Library. As well, I would like to thank all staff members from the Calgary Public Library for facilitating this webinar. So our presentation is on the Golden Age of Islam, or what we called it in Arabic, Al-Asr al-Zahabi lil-Islam. Mainly we're going to talk about the contribution to the world of sciences by the Muslim. Again, this presentation has been prepared jointly with Mr. Hamad, and I will do part of it, and then he will take over, and then we'll alternate. So before I start, I wanted to tell you that the aim today is that, so we're going to learn what the Golden Age was and what advancement and achievements happened in that time. So we are hoping this presentation aims to alert the communities as to the particular significance of the Muslim civilization and its historical role in contributing to the birth of modern civilization, and of course to the world of sciences in particular. So we will shed some lights to learn what the Golden Age was and what advancement and achievement happened that time, emphasizing a bit on astronomy. So let us explore how they affected and influenced today's mind. So the information that we are presenting hereafter has been compiled using the best evidence available and has been taken from a range of scientific and historical research database. So a disclaimer. So the content of the presentation, after a short brief about the history and spread of Islam, we're going to talk about what's the Golden Age of Islam and what led to the Golden Age. Then we're going to shed some light on some of the Muslim scholars, the reason for success and advancement and achievement, and we're going to go into more detail talking about intellectual achievement like education, as well as astronomical observatories. Then the contribution to astronomy by Muslim society, and before we end, I have some illuminating words to share, and then some thought to leave with. So history and spread of Islam. So Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, was born in Mecca in 570. The start of Islam is marked in the year of 610, following the first revelation of the Prophet Muhammad at the age of 40. The Prophet Muhammad and his followers spread the teaching of Islam throughout the Arabian Peninsula. The Islamic State was formed in the year 622 when Prophet Muhammad moved from Mecca to Medina. His death was in the 632. So within a century, after the death of Prophet Muhammad in 632, a large part of the planet from the southern Europe throughout North Africa to Central Asia and on to India was controlled by and or influenced by the new Arabic Muslim Empire. So we can see the spread started from Medina and all over. So the color coded here can see that it depends on the era, and then it shows the expansion. So the scientific glory of the Arabic nation originated on the Arabian Peninsula in the 7th century, where the preaching of the Prophet Muhammad united the Arab tribes and inaugurated the Muslim religion. Around the 711, Arab Muslim invaded southern Spain, or what's known right now as the Andalus. And this was a center of flourishing civilization. Al-Andalus was created. another center emerged later in Baghdad from the Abbasids, who ruled who ruled part of the Islamic world during the historic period later characterized by the Golden Age. So the Islamic Empire was the first truly universal civilization. So what does it mean? It means Islam brought together for the first time a diverse population consisting of people from China, India, people from all over the Middle East, North Africa, and the European. So that was very brief about this spread of the Islam. So what is the Golden Age? Many of us will ask the question. So it is actually the Golden Ages as far as the Muslims as are concerned, since their civilization at that time had been filled with discoveries, invention, development, prosperity, and other innovative accomplishments in many fields. But before we move on and then talk about the Golden Age, let me ask this question. Did modern civilization really rise from nothing? So let us ask ourselves this simple question. So I would like to begin this by deconstructing the myth of Dark Ages, which is the region, which was the period from the 600 to 1600. So it's about 1,000 years as pronounced by the European. There is a widespread misconception about the concept of the Dark Age. So let us look at those two figures. Again, what was the question? The question is, did modern civilization really rise from nothing? So in contrast to the prevalent view in most Western schools, curricula, and media culture, these two diagrams show that the classical Muslim world was the set of a creative knowledge revolution that lasted for several centuries and was the ferment of European Renaissance. So these two images actually brilliantly portray how history of science and civilization as taught by many education systems and how history of science and civilization should be taught. That's what has been given right now in our education system. This figure portray how almost the majority of the education system has failed to acknowledge the contribution made by the Chinese, by the Indian, by the Muslim in both the development of science and civilization simultaneously. So it is not merely about acknowledgement, rather than have trespassed or overlooked 1,000 golden year. It was dark ages for them, the European. This figure here fills the gap and acknowledges the contribution made by Chinese, Indian, Muslim, from Indian numeral to gunpowder, grinding machine, and paper making, to, to name a few. So let me tell you something. Science always believes in continuity and relationship between two variables. It is obvious from the first image, the one at the top, is that there are serious shortcomings. So according to science, or what we call it as rational thinking, the second image depicts more accurate and appropriate history of science and civilization. So as I said, the widespread public misconception about the Dark Age, I hope that I was able to clarify it in this slide. And there has been 1,000 year or 10th century that's been forgotten. And then it is completely lit up as it was the golden age of Islam. And this period when the grounds of modern science were mapped out and amplified. It's during that period. So the European Renaissance would not have occurred in the same way that it did if Muslim scholars had not translated classic Greek text and Roman and Indian. So in spite of this, Muslims have not always been recognized for their contribution toward civilization. And the European scholars failed to acknowledge and credit the knowledge which they acquired from the Islamic world in the period between the 6th and the 16th centuries. So this period is traditionally understood It was during the Abbasid dynasty, from the 750 to the 1258, and until the Mongol conquest Baghdad. It's the Mongol invasion and siege of Baghdad in 1258. So the end actually of the Abbasid dynasty or the empire was particularly traumatic, as the Mongol, who were largely illiterate, devastated the capital of Baghdad, destroying much of its intellectual and historical heritage. The Tigris River turned color black because of all the manuscript that been thrown in. So this golden age, it began during the reign of the Abbasid Caliph Harun al-Rashid, with the inauguration of the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, which we're going to talk about it later on, and Baghdad was the world's largest city by then, where Islamic scholars and polymaths from various paths of the world with different cultural background were mandated together by the Caliph and translate all of the known world classical knowledge. And just if somebody is not aware what the caliph means, the caliph or caliphates refer to a person or religious successor of the Prophet Muhammad, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him, that was a leader of the Muslim community. Okay, so this shows that's the golden age of Islam in this region, in this area. Okay, so So in a summary, we can say that it's a period of cultural, intellectual, political, social, economic, and scientific flourishing in the history of Islam, okay, with the achievement from the 7th until the 13th century. Some historian, or they say that, well, it lasted until the 15th or the 16th centuries, okay, but mainly it is between the 7th and the 13th. So let me give a list, and this is just a short list, not the complete list of the achievement. Okay, during the Golden Age, the 10 decimal Arabic numeral were introduced. Algebra was created. Modern observatory were established. Majority of our stars were given Arabic-based name. Astronomers gained precise and experimental valid understanding of the motion of the planet. The beginning of the modern institution and parliament. The birth of the university. Medicine and hospitals, invention of surgical instrument, the modern musical theory, the beginning of it, invention of many of our engineering devices and modern technology. And then the list can go on and on and on. So all of the above certainly did not appear by chance in the 15th century. Okay. So I want you to understand a few things here, that an essential understanding that the golden age of Islam was characterized by achievement in science and the art that transformed the Islamic world and contributed to world civilization. Now, two questions, and this presentation, we are hoping to answer this question. How did Islamic civilization preserve and extend ancient Greek, Persian, and Indian learning? Second question is, what were some contributions of Islamic civilization? And of course, we need more than 100 presentations to cover, so we're just gonna shed the light on some. Okay. So if I look at the preservation of knowledge, Muslim scholars help to preserve the knowledge of Greek and Roman by translating works and making them available to other scholars. It is because of this that European scholars were able to rediscover the works of Aristotle and other Greek philosophers. And it was in the 12th century these works were translated into Latin. So back. So the discovery of paper making technology from the China, because Chinese were the one who invented the paper, made this much easier, okay, to preserve the knowledge. Okay, so what led to the golden age? You see, I almost answered the first question a bit, but now answering these two questions in more detail by looking at what led to the golden age of Islam. Okay, so it is based on several factors. Let us see the factor that laid down the foundation of this period. Okay, so collection and translation of knowledge. So arguably, some of the achievements were based on previous initiatives taken by the ancient Egyptian, Hebrew, Persian, Greeks, and Roman. No question about this. Okay. Greek, Roman, and Indian books were translated into Arabic and later on into Latin. Okay, so I'm going into more detail now. And the Muslim scholars, scientists, and polymaths from various parts of the world with different cultural background were mandated to gather and translate all of the world classical knowledge into Arabic. Second factor is the blooming of the Islamic civilization, as well as scholarship and learning. Okay, it's the communication that became easier because of the Muslim Empire united extensive geographical areas. And then Arab conquest had formed a vast Muslim empire. In Spain, North Africa, and much of the Western and Central Asia came under Muslim rule. So Islamic civilization actually flourished, and then great cities where scholars and artists made many advances been formed. Cairo, important city. Baghdad, important cities. Damascus. And by the 8th century, Arabic was the language. By the 8th century, Arabic was the language of scholarship and science. And then shared language and their desire, the scientists, and their desire of learning allowed ideas to exchange and build upon other works. Like Jews, Christian, and Muslim work all together. As well, I mentioned Arab learned from the Chinese how to produce the paper, so more books became more available. Libraries were established. I'm going to talk about those later on. Okay, in several cities. Okay, bookshop with thousands of titles open in several cities. Some of the library contained 600,000 and 700,000 treatises and manuscripts and handwritten books. Schools and universities were established, and we're going to talk about this in more detail. So one more factor is that emphasis on religion proved to be one of the biggest influences for the Islamic Golden Age, because the growth of knowledge was aided by the inspiration of the glorious Quran and the prophetic teaching, or we call it in Arabic, the Hadith. So this placed a high value on education and emphasized the importance of acquiring knowledge, influenced Muslims of this era in their quest of knowledge and the advancement of science. So Muslims following the guideline of the Prophet studied and searched for knowledge. And then there are so many of this knowledge. Okay, you name it, medicine, biology, astronomy, all of those. So Muslims have had such a great contribution to science that if it weren't for them, neither the Renaissance nor the scientific revolution would have been possible. And despite of this, due to the conscious act of ignorance and neglect, their names and the great inventions have been written out of science and history books. So I'm gonna leave you here and give the floor to Arif to talk about the Muslim scholars. And he picked some of the famous names that, believe me, you will be surprised when you hear about their invention that we didn't know about. So Arif, you can start to share on your side.
Thanks, Dr. Raafat. I'd like to welcome again the listeners to this webinar. And I will take where Dr. Raafat left. Is the screen showing? Okay.
Yeah, it looks good,
Yes,
Mr. Arif.
Okay.
you're in good shape.
Thanks a lot. So we're starting with to show some information, give some names that of prominent Muslim scholars. Those scholars that I picked I tried to not to put too many information because there are too many scholars, but I tried to pick maybe a dozen of those important scholars who contributed during that era, and also to cover the entire era from the starting of the Islamic Golden Age up to the end. So you can see from the list here, I picked from 780 until 1330. So it covers approximately 5 or 6 centuries. Those scholars made great contributions to science, both in theory and practice. And those scholars basically, lots of their work was translated to other language later on. They picked from previous knowledge, as Dr. Raafat alluded to, and then they share it with others, and then it moved from one to the another. So quickly, I go over the names. These names are in Arabic, so for people who doesn't know Arabic, you see all the names start with al or ibn. So these are Arabic names. So al, it means the, or it's related to certain place or certain professional. And ibn, it means the son of. So if it is Ibn Sina, that means son of Sina. It's a nickname rather than a personal name. So Al-Khwarizmi, one of our first scholars who was a great in math and in other areas, Al-Fazari, Ibn Firnas, Al-Batani, Al-Zahrawi, Ibn al-Haytham, also known in English as Al-Hazin, Al-Biruni, Ibn Sina, known as Avicenna, Al-Zarqali, Ibn Rushd, or also as known as Averroes, Ibn al-Nafis, Ibn al-Shatir, and Ibn Khaldun. I tried to pick those scholars also because they cover different areas of science and professions, so you can have an idea about not just in one area of knowledge. So we start first with the Al-Khwarizmi, who was a mathematician and also astronomer who did the great work in mathematics. You can see from, maybe you can see from all the other slides later on, that most of those scholars have contribution in one area. So you can see that they are all shared in mathematics or astronomy, but some of them maybe added more areas, some not, but they are maybe most known for certain achievements or certain discoveries or contribution than other areas. But in general, at that time, people used to, or those scholars used to study in more than one area at the same time. So for Al-Khwarizmi, he was the founder of algebra, and he presented the first systematic solution of linear and quadratic equations. He also produced calendrical and astronomical tables for the movements of the sun, the moon, and the planets. And one of his important books or contribution is the book of the description of Earth. And in that book, he lists some coordinates, geographical coordinates of more than 2,400 cities in the area. More information about Al-Khwarizmi will be presented by Dr. El-Hacha later on, when he comes to talk in more detail about certain areas. The second scholar is Al-Fazari, and he was astronomer and also mathematician and a philosopher. And he's credited to have built the first astrolabe in the Islamic world. So some of those inventions or some of those instruments that the Muslim scholars built, some of them were maybe started by others earlier, but then there was some improvement on them. So here we're talking about during that era, he was the first one to build that instrument. He also composed astronomical handbooks with tables for computing celestial positions. He also translated with others the ancient Indian astronomical text prepared by Brahmagupta and by others during at that time when those scholars used to come to Baghdad they would bring their scientific research or their writings to Baghdad or to wherever they are coming, and then in this case it will be translated. So he was basically instructed by the Caliph at the time to translate those ones to Arabic so it can be shared to others. So he had kind of a contribution in doing that translation. The third scholar is Ibn Firnas, and he was more known as an inventor, an astronomer, and also a physician. And he is considered one of the one scholars that he was more he has more contribution in producing instruments, and he also himself experimented many things. One of his most famous contribution is to flight, and his glider was the first attempt to fly at heavier than air flights. And all stories talk about him building those big wings, not confirmed in the information, but it could be not true. But the idea is that he was experimenting how the man can fly. So the story says that he built big wings and then he used feathers and also wax. But then during the flight, because of the sun, that wax melted and then he died from that flight. That's a story, but maybe it's not confirmed, but that's how we learned that story. He also invented various glass planispheres and also constructed a device which indicated the motion of the planets and the stars in the universe. He also made corrective lenses to basically enlarge or magnify the letters to be placed on the writing. Our fourth scholar is Al-Battani. He also was an astronomer and mathematician. He's the greatest and best known astronomer of he is the greatest and the best known astronomer of the medieval Islamic world. His work was instrumental to the development of the science and astronomy and was frequently quoted by medieval astronomers, including Copernicus, who in one of his books that initiated the Copernican revolution, quoted Al-Battani 23 times. He was also quoted by other scientists during that era. Al-Battani accurately determined the solar year as being 365 days, 5 hours, 46 minutes, and 24 seconds, which is only 2 minutes and 22 seconds off the actual time. He also concluded how an annular solar eclipse occurs by observing that the radius between the Earth and the Sun changes throughout the year. He produced several trigonometrical relationships, one for finding the Qibla. So the Muslim interest into astronomy is basically started from trying to find some of the information that they need to practice their religion. One of it is basically to find the time for the prayer. Muslims normally pray 5 times during the day, from the morning until the night. And also to perform this prayer, they need to be basically facing the Qibla, which is where in the city of Mecca, currently in Saudi Arabia. So in order to direct themselves the correct way or the right way, they need to know that direction. So he basically invented that device. to help direct the people to Al-Qibla in Mecca. But then later on, this device was found not very precise when it is away from Mecca, because he didn't account for the spherical shape of the earth. So as you'll see during the presentation, some of those inventions, although maybe they are proved not to be 100% correct, but during that time they were considered very great based on the knowledge at that time. And that's the nature of the science, basically, since started, during the experience and during the advancement of the knowledge, lots of things get updated, and then it is not different for the Muslim scholars. But that doesn't undermine their work and their achievement. Now we move to the next scholar, Al-Zahrawi. He was more known as a surgeon and a physician and a chemist, and he was referred to as the father of modern surgery. One of his big references that he wrote, Kitab al-Tasrif, it includes 30 volumes encyclopedia. The surgery chapter becomes the standard textbook to the next 500 years after that for the European schools. The 28th chapter of that book is dedicated to pharmacy and pharmaceutical techniques. He was the first one to pioneer the use of the catgut for the internal stitches. So he had a practical, not just theoretical experience to do these things. He also pioneered the preparation of the medicines by sublimation and distillation for internal. So for Al-Zahrawi is more known as in the area of medicine and medical surgery. Now we move to the next scholar, Ibn al-Haytham, also known as Al-Hasin in English. He is also a mathematician and astronomer and physicist, and he's known as the father of modern optics. He basically is known for his theory for how vision happens, and also lots of development related to the light. He showed that the light travels in straight lines. He also developed a formula for summing of the first 100 numbers using geometric proof to prove it in mathematics. He also presented a detailed description of the physical structure of the Earth. But as I said, his main area of work and contribution is in the vision and in the light theory. Our next scholar is Al-Biruni. He's also a mathematician and also a physician in astronomy and natural science. He used trigonometry to calculate the radius of the Earth with good accuracy, although his approach has one significant problem of not being aware of the atmospheric refraction. He also developed methods to determine density using a particular type of hydrostatic balance. He also subdivided the hour to 60 minutes and seconds and thirds and fourths. Al-Biruni relied on geometry and arithmetic, science of numbers, structure of the universe, and judicial astrology. He made the first semantic distinction between astronomy and astrology. In Islam, we don't believe in astrology in the way maybe currently is shown, but we believe in astronomy as a science. So he wrote a refutation of astrology as opposed to astronomy to make a distinction between those two terms. And his reason, as some suggest, methods used by astrologers are based on pseudoscience rather than empiricism. Next scholar is Ibn Sina. He's one of the most significant physicians and astronomers, and he is called as the father. He's known as or called as the father of early modern medicine. He authored the 5-volume medical encyclopedia called the Qanun of Medicine, or the Law of Medicine, and it was used as a standard medical textbook in Islamic world and also in Europe until the 1700s. He attacked astrology by citing a passage from Quran our religious book for Muslims, to dispute the power of astrology to foretell the future. He believed that each planet had some influence on the Earth, but argued against astrologers being able to determine the exact effect. Our next scholar is Al-Zarqali, and he was an astronomer and also an instrument maker. In Latin, he is called Arzakel. He invented the equatorium for computing the position of the planets using diagrams of the Ptolemaic model, corrected geographical data from Ptolemy and Al-Khwarizmi. Specifically, he corrected Ptolemy's estimate of the longitude, the Mediterranean Sea, from 62 degrees to the correct value of 42 degrees. His model for the motion, Al-Zarqali, his model for the motion of the sun, in which the center of the sun's different moved on a small, slowly rotating circle to reproduce the observed motion of the solar apogee, was employed by Copernicus later on, who modified it to heliocentric form in his book in English on the revolutions of celestial spheres. Al-Zarqali also invented a perfected kind of astrolabe. Our next scholar is Ibn Rushd. He's a polymath and jurist who wrote about many subjects like philosophy, theology, medicine, and law. He is described as the father of secular thoughts in Western Europe. He is a proponent of Aristotelianism and wrote commentaries on nearly all of Aristotle's surviving works. He served as a royal physician in the court and wrote the general principles of medicine, which became textbook in Europe for centuries. Ibn Rushd also served as a judge and produced multiple works in the field of Islamic jurisprudence or legal theory. Also, he wrote standalone philosophical treatises, including on the intellect, on the syllogism, on conjunction with active intellect, on the motion of sphere. Ibn Nafis was now we talk about Ibn Nafis. He was a polymath who worked in the areas of medicine, surgery, physiology, anatomy, biology, and philosophy. He first to describe the pulmonary circulation. His work on the right-sided pulmonary circulation predates the later work, 1628, of William Harvey's De Motu Cordis. He had insight into what would become a larger theory of capillary circulation. Ibn Nafis believed that pulse is a direct result of heartbeat, disagreeing with Gallen's theory that it's created by arteries tonics. Ibn Nafis was one of few physicians of that time who supported the view that the brain, rather than the heart, is the organ responsible for thinking and sensation. He gave insight to medicine and human relations. His surgical techniques has 3 stages. He created that system in which the first stage is the presentation of clinical diagnosis, and he will discuss that with his patient. And then comes to the second stage, which is the operative stage, where he actually performed the operation. And then the third stage is the post-surgery or post-operative period, where he follows up with his patient after doing the surgery. Our next scholar is Ibn Shatir. He's an astronomer, mathematician, and engineer. The final quest concerning the recitation of principle is his most important astronomical treatise. In it, he drastically reformed the Ptolemaic model of the sun, moon, and planets, his reforms was mathematically identical to Copernicus' 16th century model, but conceptually different. So that the Ptolemaic model is basically assumes the Earth is the center of the universe. Copernicus is assuming the sun is the center of the universe, and then that's the difference between the two. He was inspired by his job as a timekeeper for prayers in a mosque, and then for that he created a variety of astronomical instruments to help define or determine that accurate time for the prayer during the day. Ibn Shatir made several astronomical observations and calculations for his job and for his research, and were organized in tables, astronomical tables. Al-Shatir was committed towards accurate observational data, and that was exemplified in his solar model. He calculated the true longitude and the moon to the moon, sun, and other planets using two variables. Later was found his lunar model has very similar concept as Copernicus. Our next scholar is Ibn Khaldun, was a sociologist, philosopher, and historian. He was described as the founder of the modern disciplines of historiography, sociology, and demography. The Muqaddimah, or introduction, is his best known book, which he wrote in 6 months. It's called Muqaddimat Ibn Khaldun, or Ibn Khaldun Introduction. He is influenced by many historians who came centuries after him. He influenced many historians who came centuries after him, and the significance of his work was widely acknowledged by European scholars like Machiavelli of the Renaissance. And others of the 19th century scholars. Ibn Khaldun attempted to reconcile mysticism with theology by dividing science into two different categories: religious, science of Quran, and non-religious, the other types of science. Then further classified the non-religious science into intellectual, logic, arithmetics, astronomy, etc., language, literature, poetry. In the Muqaddimah, his book, he discussed an introduction of philosophy to history in general manner, based on observable patterns with theoretical framework of known historical events of his time. Ibn Khaldun also described the beginnings, development, cultural trends, and the fall of all societies, leading to the rise of a new society, which would then follow the same trends and conjunction cycle. Another important concept he emphasizes in his work is the mastery of crafts, habit, and skills. According to Ibn Khaldun, the level of achievement of a society can be determined by just analyzing these three concepts. With this, we end the several scholars with their main achievements briefly. Now, I'm going to talk about the reasons for the success for those scholars over those centuries in getting to what they are, to what they did, and what they achieved. One of the reasons for their success is the principles and the ideals of Islam was practiced, in which various Quran, the principles and ideas of Islam was practiced. So that means all scholars basically trying to accurately follow the instruction or the direction from Islam, that throughout the various Quranic injunctions and hadith, which are the hadith is the sayings of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, placed values on education and emphasize the importance of acquiring knowledge. It's in our main part of the Muslim doctrine, or the Islamic doctrine, is basically to look for knowledge and for education wherever it is. The tolerance and respect that the Muslims gave to the contribution of other minorities and ethnic religious minorities was important to give them a freedom to do to participate in that knowledge. Just as one of the main principles of Islam is to be fair to everyone and to treat everyone fairly and equally without looking at their background or their other aspects of their life. So that basically gave encouragement to others to participate and to be part of the society. Islam was attracted to the conquered. That means when the Muslims went to open those lands outside the Arab Peninsula, they found that it is easy to become a Muslim, and Islam preached for equality. That means opportunity for people to move up in society is available for everyone. Honoring merchants, also Muslim states paid attention to trade and to the merchants who brought or who were traveling from one place to one place. And then that attention to trade and to merchants basically encouraged having those routes to become a mean to basically transfer the knowledge from one place to one place through those routes. So there was a cultural influence that was moving from one place to one place, and then at the end it was a factor to basically melt all those different societies in one based on their religion. Political and economical stability of Muslim states. During that period, for many centuries, Muslim state was very strong and was very stable, and that stability also helped in the advancement of the science. Encouragement and support presented by the Muslim leaders to the science and to the art and to the scientists and researchers was very important factor. There was funding for buildings and for institutions, and also for schools and libraries, and also personal funding to scholars and to scientists to do work or to translate, and also building hospitals and any place where this science can be practiced, such as astronomical observatories. Finance to scholars and innovators, establishing laws that favored scientific advancements. And then after that, the introduction to old science by Greek, Romans, and Indians through translation of their works was basically an important factor, so that new knowledge was built on the older knowledge by others. So that concludes the reasons for the success that the Muslim scholars had behind them. Now, if we talk briefly about some of the achievements that happened, we can categorize those achievements into 4 categories. I'll talk about the first 3, the economical achievements and the political achievements and the social achievements, and then I'll leave the intellectual to Dr. Raafat after that. In the economical achievement, due to the strong trade routes, as I mentioned, with the East and with increasing movement for writing and translating, Chinese paper industry was brought into the Muslim land and in the Middle East, and from there it was spread into North Africa and Europe. On the political aspect, the Muslim state became bigger and stronger. Therefore, a better governing system was a necessity. And based on that, there was big advancement in the state system took place, and that included both civil, such as communication, laws, etc., and also in the military related to army and police. Islamic laws were created to keep peace and order. These laws were built from the Quran mainly. We also saw a legal system being built with judges appointed to judge between parties. On the social aspect, Arabic language being the language of the Quran, and each Muslim need to read Quran in Arabic, so they had to learn that language, and then that language became a reason to basically put all these different societies in one society that basically bring the differences in the cultural background, minimize those differences, and melt those people into more one society. This made interaction between the different societies much easier and led to more cultural exchange among them. With this, I will end my part, and thank you for listening, and I will transfer now the presentation to Dr. Raafat to finish his part. Thank you so much. Dr. Raafat.
Yeah, thank you, Arif. Okay, now, if you allow me, I just want to say something, just to remember that it's an example of the huge imbalance in the digital information space may be witnessed by Googling the name of some Muslim inventors. So if you try to Google the names and you compare the search result with other Western scientists and inventors. So something that I couldn't find a recent statistic, but there is one in 2018 that the name of Da Vinci gets 43.5 million search results, and Isaac Newton 4.2 million. However, Al-Khwarizmi, who is the founder of the algebra, and other significant Muslim inventors, they both get below 50,000. Fatima al-Fihriya, the founder of one of the first university in history, Ibn al-Haytham, Al-Khwarizmi, they don't get more than 500,000. 50,000, sorry. Okay, so now I'm gonna take over from here and then talk about the advancement and intellectual achievement, like mainly talk about the education, because many intellectual institutions such as school, library, bookstores, university, schools were built in the Arabian Peninsula. So we're gonna talk about those in a more detail. Okay, so the first known university, and this is not something that is unknown, were in Damascus, Cordoba, Spain, Tunisia, Morocco, and Cairo. But the interesting is that when you think about the oldest university in the world, okay, probably the first one comes actually Oxford or Bologna. Okay, but according to the UNESCO and the Guinness World Record, Al-Qarawiyyin University is the oldest existing and continually operating educational institution in the world. It was founded in the 859 by a Tunisian princess called Fatima al-Fihriya in Morocco, in the city called Fez. And the university is not only the oldest higher education institution on earth, but also the first to be founded by a woman, and a Muslim one at that. So Fatima used her inheritance from her father, he was a merchant, and built actually what's called a madrasa, like school, okay, and a mosque that eventually grew up and grew into a place of a higher education. So it's still operating actually until now. And it also introduced the system of awarding degrees according to different level of study in many range of field. Okay, so although university first focus was on the religion instruction, but its field of study expanded quickly to include the medicine, mathematics, astronomy, and many other. Now, the spread of Islamic university is demonstrated by the oldest university, and Al-Azhar in Cairo is the world oldest university dating over 1,000 years. Okay. The library of the University of Al-Azhar was founded in, well, the Azhar was like, it became as a university in 975, but started at the library in 969. And then it started as madrasa in the Arabic world for any type of educational institute. Okay, so Al-Azhar University has long been regarded as the foremost institution in the Islamic world of the study of Islamic law. And it was actually, in fact, the prototypes for the first European university, including Bologna, Heidelberg, and Sorbonne. So they followed the Al-Azhar. And then something that interesting that I didn't know, okay, and that the academic graduation, the cap and gown, is originated from Al-Azhar University in Cairo in 975. Another university is Al-Zaytuna University. So the spread of Islamic university is demonstrated now by Al-Zaytuna University in Tunisia. As we mentioned, the others, Al-Azhar and Al-Qarawiyyin. And then all of this university, actually, in fact, they were the prototype for the first European university. Okay. The Al-Zaytuna University started as a madrasa in 737, and now it is a public university. Ibn Khaldun, and Arif talked about him. He's the first social historian in the history. Okay, and he's founder of the modern discipline of historiography, sociology, economy, and so on. Now, it includes tens of thousands of books in almost all subjects and sciences. Okay, and it is considered the highest Institute of Theology and Islamic Civilization in Tunisia. The House of Wisdom, okay, or it's known the Grand Library of Baghdad, or in Arabic, Bayt al-Hikmah. And as we talked about, that it is the one of the biggest library where ancient literature from all over the world were brought and translated. Talked about that in the Abbasid dynasty. It was the Caliph al-Mansur in the 762 who built Baghdad, okay, and then formed that House of Wisdom, okay. So it was built in Baghdad, which was the world's largest city by then, and then he made it as his capital, and then he invited scholars, and then he sponsored scholars to come and then do translation of books and then have it in. So the library of the House of Wisdom, at a certain time in the history, in the 12th century, it contained 700,000 handwritten volumes. That's something huge, okay? So it attracted scholars from different continents, okay, to share information about the diversity of their culture, ethnic background, knowledge, mathematics, and astronomy. They translated works from Aristotle, Euclid, and other important thinkers of ancient Persia, Greek, and Rome. And different fields were studied, ranging from humanities to astronomy, chemistry, literature, optics, and so on. But again, unfortunately, it was destroyed, as we said earlier, by the Mongol in 1258 when they conquered Baghdad. In Cairo, Khazan al-Qusur, and this was established by the Fatim Caliph, Abu Mansur, and it contained 200,000 volumes, of which 6,000 were on astronomy and mathematics. Every mathematician used to be in astronomy. The other one is Dar al-Hikmah, also it's called the House of Knowledge in Cairo, and then founded also by the Fatimid Caliph. And at a certain time, it was called the Wonder of the World, and the Andalusian House of Wisdom. And this was founded by the Caliph, one of the Umayyad Caliph, Al-Hakam. And it was beginning as a personal library for him because he used to pay a lot of money to get treaties or manuscript. And it contained of about 600,000 handwritten volume and books. So now observation of the sky had begun the uh, in Islam and very early. The observatory as a distinct scientific institution for observation and where astronomy and allied subjects were researched. Okay, so the astronomical observatory owes its origin to Islamic science. Okay, I'm just gonna put two. The first astronomical observatory in Islamic world, it was in Baghdad, and it was ordered by Khalif al-Ma'mun in 828. And it was the creation of the first systematic astronomical observatory in the Islamic world. Okay. The construction was directed by scholars from the House of Wisdom, two astronomers. And then the meridian degree were measured, solar parameters were established, detailed observation of the sun, moon, and planet were taken. So this was observing the movement of the object or the planet was something that they have to look after. Another one is the Isfahan Observatory. Okay, so at the time of founding the observatory, Isfahan was the capital of the great Seljuk Empire, and Omar Khayyam, Arif talks about him as an astronomer. He participated in overseeing this observatory that was established by Atusi, who was the visor of the Shah. And then he invented the Jalali calendar. It's a solar calendar with a very precise 33 years intercalation cycle that provide the basis of Persian calendar that is still in use after nearly a millennium. Okay, so it was based on observation of solar transit, would not have needed either leap years or seasonal adjustment. You know what I talk about, the leap year adjustment. So, however, as observatory development continued, Islamic scientists began to pioneer the planetarium. And what's the difference between both? At the observatory, you must look up into the night sky. The planetarium allows for universe, planet, and star to project at eye level in a room. So it was a big movement. And then a scientist, Abbas bin Firnas, Arif talked about him from a different perspective. He built or created or built a planetarium in his home that included artificial storm noises and was completely made of glass. Being the first of its kind, it is very similar to what we see for a planetarium today. Okay, now let's move on, talk about contribution of astronomy. Arif mentioned all of those, not all of them, but some of the most important scholars. And then we tried as much as we can to cover most of the area. And he reported who were the astronomers, okay? So astronomy started among the Muslims during the period of Abbasid Khalif, Al-Ma'mun, okay? And then the Islamic Golden Age strongly promoted the astronomy, and several scholars contributed to its development, has been reported by Arif. However, some people are unaware of what Muslim accomplished, believe that astronomy died with the Greeks and was brought to life again by Nicholas Copernicus in the 15th century, and who was a Polish astronomer, who is famous for introducing the sun-centered theory of the solar system, as Arif mentioned, which marked the beginning of modern astronomy, even though it was not universally accepted. Okay, as well, a significant number of stars in the sky, they have the Arabic name, such as Al-Tayr, Deneb, Al-Dibaran. And not only this, there are so many astronomical terms such as Azimuth and Nadir, are still referred by their Arabic names. So, but why astronomy? Although Arif touched about it a bit when he was talking about those scholars, but let me put it in and I'll recap it. Okay, and so the religion obligation to determine the Qibla and prayer time inspired progress in astronomy. Okay, so let's take each one of those. The direction of Qibla, because locating Kaaba in Mecca allow worshippers far from holy city pray facing the right direction, and this is still a big debate in even in North America. The prayer times, because Muslims had to pray 5 times per day. Finding out the exact time of the 5 daily prayer, how? By the position of the sun. So the prayer time is by the sun. What about the lunar calendar? It's by the moon. So the determination of the lunar month and visibility of the crescent moon, such as the beginning and the end of the holy month of Ramadan, that's why we don't have a specific date when Ramadan starts, when Ramadan ends. Everything is based on the observation of the crescent, the 2 Eids, and the pilgrimage. And then also they wanted to they have passion about learning about the universe. And then just want to give you this. Al-Biruni. So he discussed the possibility whether or actually he set the principle that the earth is at the center of the universe and that it has no motion. And this is one of his diagram illustrating the different phases of the moon indicate the moon revolving around the earth. Okay, how are we doing with time? Okay, so I'm gonna move on to some of the invented instrument. Okay, and I'm not gonna talk in detail about them. The first one is this sundial, and this was invented by Al-Khwarizmi, and it's a device that tells the time. So you have it consists of the flat plate, the dial, and the gnomon, which casts a shadow onto the dial. So right now, according to this one, this is in Melbourne. The time here, I wish that they had the real clock and then took the photo. This is the time is 10:30. Okay. The quadrant, which is an instrument that is used to measure angles up to 90 degrees. Okay, there are several different variations of the instrument that were later produced by medieval Muslim astronomers. Okay, so who was that person? It's Al-Khwarizmi. He's the one who invented the sine quadrant, and this was developed in the 9th century and actually remained popular until the 19th century. Okay, it was used for accurate timekeeping by the sun and the stars, could be observed from any latitude, finding the direction, telling the time as function of altitude. This is the one on the left-hand side. One on the right-hand side is also by Al-Khwarizmi, which is, it is a turning board. He called it the Ali date. Okay, it has the same function as the quadrant. It allows one to sight a distance object and use the line to sight the line of sight to perform a task. Okay, so you can draw a line on a plane table in the direction of the object or to measure the angle of the object from some reference point. The astrolabe, and this is actually, it is an ancient astronomical, and actually you can call it the computer that solves problems relating to time and the position of the celestial bodies such as the sun, the stars in the sky. It's been used as a navigational system and finding the direction of the Qibla for the daily prayer. The first person who invented this was Al-Fazari, and he was the first one to build a brass astrolabe in Islam. Al-Fazari in the 8th century. And then Al-Battani come after Al-Biruni, they improved it. The one on the right-hand side is the artillery sphere, which is also developed by or invented by Al-Fazari. So it's like a spherical astrolabe, 3-dimension. Okay, it demonstrates the motion of the stars around the Earth. Okay, And it's been introduced to the Western Europe in the late 10th century. The photo on the left-hand side is the planisphere, and this was an instrument invented by El-Biruni, and it is like a star chart. You can call it analog computing instrument. Okay, it can be adjusted to display the visible star for any time and date. Okay, the one on the right-hand side is the equatorium, and it was invented by Al-Zarqali. And this is a mechanical device, this one, for finding the longitude and position of the moon, the sun, the planet without calculation using a geometrical model. Okay, like the Ptolemaic model. Okay, so we come to an end. And then when I was doing this research, I came across some illuminating word. I thought that, you know what, this is interesting to hear or to share. The first one is by an American historian of astronomy, Owen Gingerich. What did he say? And I made the animation so that we can all read it. Okay, I'm gonna read it too. Historians who track the development of astronomy from antiquity to the Renaissance sometimes refer to the time from the 8th through the 14th centuries as the Islamic period. During that interval, most astronomical activity took place in the Middle East, North Africa, and Moorish Spain, while Europe languished in the Dark Ages. The torch of ancient scholarship has passed into Muslim hands. Islamic scholars kept it alive, and from them it passed to Renaissance Europe. I like it. I like it. Another one is by Carlton Fiorna, which is the chairman, president, and CEO of the HP company, or everybody knows the HP company. That's why her term ended in 2005. In 2003, she made a speech, and I took part of her speech, and we're gonna read it all together. And that's why I said illuminating words. Okay, there was once a civilization that was the greatest in the world. And this civilization was driven more than anything by invention. Its mathematician created the algebra and algorithm that would enable the building of computers and the development of encryption. Its astronomers looked into the skies, named the stars, and paved the way for space travel and exploration. The civilization I'm talking about was the Islamic world from the year 800 to the 1600. The technology industry would not exist without the contribution of Arab mathematicians. And then without the algorithm that was invented by Al-Tarqawi in the 8th century, I wouldn't be able to do this presentation right now. We wouldn't have a computer without the algorithm. That's the name is after him. So what I want you to leave right now with this presentation with some food thought to leave. Okay. Well, so the Arab world cover a vast geographic area comprising many different countries in Asia and Africa. The contemporary world owes much of its progress in all fields, of human intellectual activity, including, you name it, medicine to Arabic culture, especially the advancement made during this golden age. The glorious historic background of the Arabic world permits us to identify the depth that humanity owes to the golden age of Arabic science, and to evaluate the research contribution made by Muslim scholars to sciences in our own day. Islam has a holistic view of development that is social, human, physical, mental, cultural, and economic. It holds education and knowledge as central to development. And then from the above and everything we talked about, we mentioned today, it's clear that Islam has contributed to both education and social change. And the last one is that every civilization has borrowed and learned from previous civilization without considering the contribution of previous civilization, including the Islamic Golden Age. So it would be impossible to have a clear understanding of the so-called modern world and the event that led to the European Renaissance. So with this, I end our presentation. And actually, one thing that I would like to say that, as I mentioned at the beginning, that the focus of this lecture is to alert the community as to the particular significance of Muslim civilization and its historical role in giving birth to the modern science and technology. But let me ask you, isn't it remarkable and exciting how much of today's historical knowledge comes from the Islamic Golden Age? So with this, I end that. We are hoping that you finish watching this presentation with a feel of enlightenment, appreciation, and justice toward the people that have been misrepresented or mistreated or not, or eliminated, if I want to say that. So thank you very much. So we can take questions. I don't know what the time. Oh, okay.
Thank you very much for that presentation. That was amazing. I do have a few questions.
Oh, thank you.
I do have a few questions that we could perhaps cover. If you have any questions, you can put it in the Q&A box at the bottom. We have a question. What do we know about the contact between Muslim scholars with European scholars? Was there much contact between the two of them?
Arif?
Yes, Dr. Raafat.
You came across this. Do you want to answer it or do you want me to answer? You did mention it in your part. Arif?
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Yeah. So I said when I was looking at these information, I tried to avoid mentioning or talking about which part of the Islamic State these scholars were born or were doing their research. They are basically all over the world, Islamic world. I mean, from Central Asia to Middle East to North Africa to South Spain. I didn't come to see or to find in the information direct communication between the European and the Muslim scholars. All what I found is that when people used to travel, they would bring knowledge and then they would translate, or maybe during the recent, because Muslim didn't get to southern Spain until later on. So for the first period, maybe there was no contact, but maybe during the last centuries, there were maybe some contacts between them. But I haven't come to certain examples of that. But for sure, there was some contact or some interaction between the two, but I haven't gone that far.
Great, thank you. Who funded some of these scientists, and were there female scholars as well?
Oh yeah, oh yes, there were so many female scholars. Yeah, that's actually something we missed. We should have included some of them. They were sponsored by the Caliph. So he's the one who sponsored them. Even building the observatory and all of those, it was sponsored by the whether the Abbasid Empire, Caliph, or the Fatimid, or Seljuk, or the Umayyad.
Great. Did the Crusades have any impact on the Islamic Golden Age?
In which way?
Did they hinder it or enhance it in any way? Or it just kind of had a neutral impact? It didn't really impact the scholars too much?
In a negative way, you mean impacted in a negative way?
Yeah, did it impact it in a negative way at all? Or did the research continue unabated?
No, the research continued. You know, you're talking 10th century. You're talking 1,000 years. So the research continued, even though after the Mongols sieged Baghdad, research continued. Okay, maybe not as it was before, because the entire empire, Islamic empire, started to lose in a bit.
Okay. How did Muslim scholars get access to ancient Greek and Roman texts?
Oh, okay. So the Caliph used to buy those textbook, and then so send messengers to India, to Rome, and try to get copies of those treaties, manuscript books, and then sometimes he used to pay 1,000 dirham at that time. 1,000 dirham, maybe like $100,000 at this time right now. So the Caliph had all of them. They had the passion for learning, and then they sponsor scholars. They pay for them, and they buy those books, and then all what they ask is just to do the translation.
Okay, that's great.
Arif, if you have anything to add, please go ahead.
No, thank you. Yeah, I'm okay.
There is a question in the Q&A that is written in Arabic, so I might not be able to read part of that phrasing, but it is translated to English, and it's a verse from the Quran. He who made the stars for you to guide you in the darkness of the land and the sea. The question asks, do you think phrases from the Quran as proof of Muslim as pioneer in navigation science in land and sea, and further to prove that Muslims were maybe the first to sail to North America?
Okay. So this what's written in Arabic is ayah from the Quran. What is it? Oh, I lost it.
Oh. Yeah, if you click on the answered, it'll pop up again.
Oh, okay. وهو الذي جعل لكم النجوم لتهتدوا بها في ظلمات البر والبحر قد فصلنا الآيات لقوم يعلمون. So the translation, yes, he who made the stars for you to guide you in the darkness of the land and the sea. So the question, do you think this phrase from Quran as a proof of Muslim as pioneer in navigation science in land and sea? Yes, I will answer yes. And then and further to prove that Muslim was the first to sail to North America. Yeah. So Mr. Badran answered, actually sent the question and answered. So yes, this verse in the Quran tells us that Muslims were pioneer in navigation in the land and sea.
Great. I'd like to ask a question. In some of the illustrations, we see observers looking through long tubes. They might have,
yes.
yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, okay. That's what I said. I have a lot of things. So I'm going to share the screen. Okay. So this one, right?
Yes.
So
do we have any evidence that Islamic scholars independently invented or used the telescope before Galileo?
yes, Al-Battani, well, he constructed the instrument which was to be used in locating the first crescent moon on the horizon. But these tubes did not use lenses, but were still useful in that they enabled the observers to focus on a part of the sky by eliminating the light interference. So that was Al-Battani during his time. So I'm not sure if I did answer your question.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you. Somebody mentions that you mentioned that education typically skips over the Dark Ages and ignores the contributions of Muslim scientists. This person has done a science degree at a university, and there's some achievements that are mentioned about Muslims. Is that not a usual requirement of most institutions?
Yeah, as you said, some, but not everything. So there is a lot of things that have been omitted and not given the credit. So I didn't say not at all, okay? It wouldn't happen that you have a history textbook without mentioning one of these scholars, okay?
Do you want to just mention about what kind of brought the golden age of Islam to an end? Was that the Mongol invasion typically, or something else?
Arif, are you answering or I am?
You can go ahead.
Okay, so well, it started with the Mongol, okay, invasion, and then there is a lot after that. There's had been so many political things that happened inside the empire that made it to get loosened up. And I guess I do have a slide that it talks about this, but anyway, that's a very brief answer.
Great.
I may add to that if you wish.
Sure.
Yeah, the weaknesses started actually before the Mongols invaded Baghdad. So the Islamic State was strong at the very first, let's say, 200 or 300 centuries years of its establishment. But then after that, it started to get weakened and weakened due to internal disagreements, looking for personal interest sometimes. But that didn't become a very hindering factor for the normal life. The Mughal, when they came and they invaded, basically formally ended the Islamic State, formally. But after that, there was maybe 200 years or so. It's all full of fights here and there. Remember when I said in my part that the stability of the state was a big factor at the beginning, because when the state was strong, it was economically stable, it was politically stable. So that basically is a good environment. And this is something common, like not necessarily for the Islamic world. It's for any society. Is basically that's the state. And also, it's always like that. The civilization rise to a certain level, and then after that collapses, and then another one rise after that. And this is the history tells us it's always going like that.
Okay, thank you very much for the input there. I have a question. When it comes to the discrepancies of scholars and others, what is the best way to explain the original scholars' experiences?
So discrepancy in gathering the information about specific scholars, or
Yeah. You know what? Maybe I'll have that person maybe add a little bit onto that. But let me ask another one.
Because I can tell you that when we were doing our research, me and Arif, we face at certain time difficulty that you can find a name of a person that mentioned that did something, but it's turned out to be another person. Sometimes the family name is the same, but the first name is not the same, or vice versa. And sometimes the year. So that's why we were able to find that there is some discrepancy in the information that presented. You know, you cannot trust that you can take anything from anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
We've been working on this for a long time, to make sure that the info is correct.
Yeah, and they, I guess they followed up with about the timing. So it sounds like a lot of the cases the Islamic scholars got there first, but you know their experiences are that you know it was kind of pushed aside. Let me ask another question. We probably only have time for another 2 more questions before we close off this meeting. There's quite a lot of questions still outstanding, but we can pass future question. If you email the RASC, we can pass the questions on to our guests tonight if you would like to have some more answered. But the question is, what do you think the single greatest contribution of the Muslim Golden Age was?
A single?
I guess you both might have a different opinion on what the single greatest one was.
Well, there is so many things, because in every field, okay, I cannot say one that is from all the field, okay. So in astronomy you have, in medicine you have, in optics you have, so in mathematics, I can tell from in mathematics is the algebra, is the algorithm, because every person who has a background in computer, who studies computer science, knows and learn about that. Without the algorithm that been invented by Al-Khwarizmi, we cannot have those computers. In the medicine, there's go ahead, Arif.
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Raafat. I guess maybe if you ask this question, maybe 500 years ago, you can't find answer. But I guess whatever proved to be used right now, it would be the best invention or contribution, which is as Dr. Raafat mentioned, is the genuine work in mathematics and algebra and algorithm that I can consider it one of the best ones.
Wonderful. Maybe let's finish it off. Looking at the history of the region and its contributions, what factors could reignite the passion in the region for science and innovation?
That's a political question. If you ask me, I would say if you bring justice, you'll get everything. That's my short answer.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time. If anybody has any questions that they would like to ask, please contact us at the RASC and we will forward the questions on to our 2 guests that were here this evening. So again, I just want to thank you so very much, Dr. El-Hacha and Arif, for an amazing talk. And I very much enjoyed it. And I'm sure a lot of our guests here enjoyed it as well. Absolutely amazing and very inspiring. So thank you.